Okay, admit it. When you hear a history lesson, you don't exactly jump for joy. Right. It
Right.
might even bring back some memories of cramming for exams that you'd rather forget.
Hmm.
But what if I told you we could uncover some surprising insights about learning by digging into a really unique approach to history?
Hmm. Intriguing. Tell me more.
Well, today we're taking a deep dive into the world of Charlotte Mason, a really influential educator from the early 20th century. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Homeschooling. That's not for me.
Hmm.
But trust me on this.
Okay.
We're looking at excerpts from Mason's homeschool curriculum guides. But her ideas are way more relevant than you might think, even if you, like me, haven't cracked open a textbook in years.
I'm intrigued. What makes her approach so unique?
It's about understanding how we learn best. Mason argued that history shouldn't be about memorizing names and dates. She even said that even someone as brilliant as Thackeray couldn't make a dry lecture series on kings and queens captivating enough for real understanding.
So it's not just about the what, but the how we actually internalize information.
Exactly. And that's where mind memory comes in, which she contrasted with rote word memory, drawing on the work of philosopher Henri Bergson.
Ah, Bergson. So it's about going beyond memorizing facts and figures and really delving into the heart of the matter.
Yes. Think about a historical figure whose story genuinely moved you. It's not just the dates, right?
Mhm.
It's about how their experiences, their struggles, shaped your understanding of, say, ambition or resilience.
Absolutely. It's like that saying, you might forget what someone did, but you'll never forget how they made you feel. It's about history coming alive, making us think differently about the world.
That's such a great point. So how did Mason actually put this into practice with her students? How do you cultivate that mind memory?
Well, this is where it gets interesting. Mason had this, well, unique method. No lectures, just independent reading. Kids would dive into history books on their own.
Sounds pretty hands-off.
There's a catch. They then had to tell the stories back in their own words.
That sounds deceptively simple. Did it actually work?
Surprisingly, yes. What seems simple on the surface, it turns out, is actually incredibly effective. It's about active recall. Countless studies have shown that actively recalling information strengthens understanding way more than passively reading.
That makes so much sense. It's like when you're trying to learn something new,
Yeah,
you don't truly grasp it until you have to explain it to someone else or actually use it.
exactly. Mason, being a lover of literature, uses this great example from Shakespeare's Henry VIII. There's the scene where a character vividly describes Anne Boleyn's coronation. And for Mason, this showed how ingrained storytelling was in everyday life. It wasn't just entertainment, it was how people made sense of their world.
It's like how we use stories today to connect, share experiences, even learn from each other.
Precisely. And that brings us to a point that Mason really emphasized. This method wasn't just about making history fun. It was about cultivating what she called stability of thought and action, especially in the rapidly changing world of the early 1900s.
That's something we can all relate to, I think. The early 1900s were a time of massive upheaval, right? New technologies, political movements, kind of like today, when you think about it.
And that's what makes Mason's ideas so relevant even now, over a century later. She recognized that in times of rapid change, it's so easy to feel unmoored, uncertain, and the stability she talked about. It's about mental resilience, a grounded worldview that can handle all the change and uncertainty.
It's like she could see into the future.
Yeah.
Recognizing these challenges we face now with information overload and this feeling that things are changing faster than we can keep up with.
Absolutely. And what's even more interesting is she saw this stability not just as an individual thing, but as something crucial for a healthy society. She was worried about what would happen with an uneducated public suddenly having more power in a world changing so rapidly.
That's a really interesting point. So she wasn't just focused on like well-rounded individuals, but thinking about the bigger picture, a well-informed and resilient society. So how did she see history contributing to that?
Well, remember how she emphasized telling history? It wasn't just about remembering the facts, but internalizing those narratives, making them your own. She believed that in doing that, individuals connect with a larger story, their community, nation, humanity as a whole, even.
So each person develops this strong sense of place, of purpose within a larger context. And by sharing those stories, they're also building a shared understanding of who they are as a society.
Precisely. It's about fostering that sense of belonging, that shared identity that's crucial in times of division and uncertainty, wouldn't you say? It reminds me of, well, the importance of oral history in cultures all over the world, passing down traditions, values, a sense of identity through generations.
It's amazing how those ancient methods of learning, like storytelling and oral history, are becoming so relevant again in our modern tech-driven world.
It really speaks to their lasting power. Going back to Mason, it wasn't just about textbooks, right? She was a real advocate for the power of literature, wasn't she?
Absolutely. Mason believed that literature, historical fiction in particular, could make history come alive in a way that textbooks often struggled to do.
Exactly. She saw it as a way for children to truly immerse themselves in different times and places, to really understand what it was like to live back then, walk in the shoes of people from the past and develop a deeper, more empathetic understanding of the human experience.
It's about going beyond the dates and the battles and really trying to connect with the human side of it all, right? The hopes, the struggles, the dreams of those who came before us.
Precisely. And for Mason, it wasn't just about engagement. She believed that by fostering empathy and understanding through literature, we could create a more just, more compassionate world.
Which feels incredibly important these days, wouldn't you say? In a world that's so often characterized by division and conflict, being able to understand and empathize with those who are different from us, it seems more vital than ever.
Absolutely. And, this connection with the past through literature, it isn't limited to historical fiction either. Even contemporary novels can offer valuable insights into the historical forces that shape our world today.
That's a great point. It's about recognizing that history isn't just something confined to textbooks. It's all around us.
Precisely. The more we learn to see those connections, the more informed and engaged we become. History isn't just something that happened in the past. It's a living force that shapes the world we live in today.
It's almost as if we're all characters in a story that's still being written, isn't it?
Exactly. And the more we understand those chapters that came before, the better equipped we are to write a future that we can all be proud of.
Yeah, it really makes you wonder what stories we're missing.
Yeah.
It reminds me, going back to something we touched on earlier, Mason insisted on teaching global history from a young age. It wasn't enough for her to just focus on one nation's story.
Right. She really believed that limiting history to just one nation, even your own, could lead to, and these are her words, an insular and arrogant habit of mind.
Wow, strong words. Makes you think.
Yeah.
It's easy to fall into that trap, though, seeing the world just through our own limited perspective, especially if that's all we've ever known.
Absolutely. And that's why she thought it was so important to expose students to all sorts of cultures and civilizations from a young age. She wanted them to really grasp the richness and complexity of the human story, not just one part of it. She believed that even young children could benefit from learning about, say, ancient Egypt, and not just for its own sake, but to see how civilizations, rise and fall, face similar challenges.
It's almost like by studying other cultures, we understand our own better.
Precisely. It's like the saying, travel is the best education, but you don't actually have to travel to broaden your horizons. Reading history, immersing ourselves in literature from different cultures, these are all ways to become, you could say, global citizens.
It's about cultivating that sense of curiosity and wonder about the world and our place in it. And as you said earlier, recognizing that our own stories, our own experiences are just one small part of this much larger human narrative.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Charlotte Mason and her approach to history, to learning, really, what are some key takeaways you hope our listeners are walking away with today?
I think the biggest one, and maybe the most relevant to us today, is how important it is to really engage with the past. It's not enough to just passively take in historical facts or just skim headlines. We need to wrestle with those stories, make them our own, and most importantly, apply those lessons to our own lives. Just like Mason's students told history, we need to actually think about it, think critically about what we're learning and how it connects to the present.
And to remember that history isn't some stagnant collection of dusty facts. It's a living conversation that we're all a part of.
Exactly. And that means being open to different perspectives, to challenging our own assumptions, and never being afraid to ask why.
Because in the end, it's about recognizing the connections between the past, present, and future. Understanding that the choices we make today, well, they shape the world we leave behind. Which leads us to a final thought for our listeners as we wrap up today. If, as Mason argued, deeply understanding history can help us navigate the world today, what histories are we failing to learn from? What stories are being overlooked? What voices silenced? And how might that impact the future we're creating?
That's an important question for us all to consider. It reminds us that we're not just studying history, we're living it, we're creating it each and every day.